real parents, real stories. It's the Meet the Parents podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 58 of the Meet the Parents podcast and another round of parenting-based chat. I'm Tim from Slouching Towards Thatcham, and tonight I'm joined by Hannah from Budding Smiles, John from Dad You Geek, and Mark from Best Dad I Can Be. Hello everyone.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hi, Tim.
So this week, with Father's Day having taken place last weekend, we're going to focus most of the discussion about the world of dads, with a little catch up with Hannah to talk about her recent return to full-time employment. Last Sunday was Father's Day in the UK, and indeed many other countries around the world. A day to celebrate the role that us dads play in family life, whether it's our children being nice to us or us remembering what our fathers did for us. So, what did we all get up to on Father's Day? Let's start with the dads. John, what did your family do for you? Any presents? And if so, did they get a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
For once, I actually got what I asked for, which was they said give me some ideas, and I can only think of two things. One was, and this is going to sound ridiculous now, but anyway, one was I like Molten Brown soap. And because I'm going to the gym quite a lot at the minute on my health drive, I run out of all my Molten Brown gym stuff. So I asked for all of that to be replaced. So I've got a nice new little shower bag, basically, with a load of Molten Brown stuff in, which was very, very nice.
I bet you smell lovely now.
Yeah, and to make it a bit more manly, I then got a massage voucher. Because I've been aching quite a bit from the gym, but so yeah, I got two very manly presents this Father's Day. But I am over the moon for both of them. Really, that's not going to go down well for my reputation at all, is it?
Nope. Mark, how about you?
Well, I got a phone call from number one's son, who's in South America, so that was good. The fact that he actually remembered and managed to time it, given the 6-hour time difference, that was good. Alex gave me a couple of books. One was Christopher Hitchens' collected essays, which I really like. And he gave me a copy of the Quran and said, given what's happening, Dad, maybe you ought to read this so you know what you're talking about when you start spouting off. And my daughter was just on her way back, pretty much spent the whole day coming back from university. So that is pending, although I got quite a nice card with a nice message inside it.
The Quran is probably something that more of us could do with reading, or at the very least understanding.
Because Alex at 18 is the youngest, I don't say this is what I would like. I sort of feel that if I've done anywhere half competent job as a parent, they ought to know me by now. So I was really, really impressed with that. So I've got that. I've started reading it. So I really like it when they put some thought in and kind of hit what you like without being prompted. That's really good.
Definitely. I mean, a very unusual, but also obviously a very thoughtful present. As for me, we actually had a quiet weekend. Originally, we were all going to go to London to go out for dinner with my family, as we traditionally do, but my mum was ill, so we've ended up having to postpone. So instead, I was taken out for a nice dinner with Heather and the kids on Saturday evening. Well, I say taken out, I still ended up paying the bill somehow.
It's all right, Tim. I cooked dinner yesterday and I bought dinner yesterday, so don't think you're alone.
Yeah, but at least then on Sunday I was treated to breakfast in bed and a few small gifts. We don't really go overboard on the presents front in our house. Then Isaac and I went out shopping and to have a little one-to-one time in the morning, and then we spent the afternoon playing outside with our neighbours' kids and having a communal barbecue, which I didn't have to cook. So yeah, it was really nice. Hannah, what about you? What was Father's Day in the Clark household like?
Well, we attempted to have a day just the four of us on Saturday, and we went to Nottingham and we were going to go to a nice Thai restaurant that we like, and the kids were basically feral, especially Toby, and it just wasn't the most pleasant day in the world. So we kind of drew a line under that and drank some beer when we got home and felt a bit better about life. But then Sunday itself was actually quite nice. The kids were in much nicer moods, and we had brunch out in the garden. We do this thing that Phil and I have done pretty much since we've been together, which is Sunday Bun Day, and we buy like the rolls that you stick in the oven, and we just have cheese and ham and salami, sun-dried tomatoes and all that sort of stuff, and just make up nice tasty buns to eat. So we had that with some Prosecco and orange juice. And then we went over to my parents' house. The kids stay over there on Sunday evenings. So we headed over there and had a meal with my mum and dad and my granddad. But so the Sunday itself was actually nice, which made up for Saturday having been a bit horrendous.
Yeah, no, very nice. And it's that thing, isn't it? Kids, small kids in particular, and hot weather aren't a great combination at the best of times, are they?
No.
Now, I said that in our household we don't really go particularly big on presents for Father's Day, but according to the National Retail Federation in the US, Americans spend an average of $135, so that's about £105 on gifts for Father's Day. But then the equivalent average spend for Mother's Day is $186, so about £145, so more than a third more. Now, apparently the numbers for the UK aren't vastly dissimilar. So what do we think about those figures? Hannah?
I'm amazed that much is spent full stop.
Me too.
We don't know. I think, what did we get Phil? We got him a cushion with a sound wave on it from the Turtles song Happy Together, because it's at the beginning of Minions and that's our family favourite song, family favourite film. So I thought that would be a really lovely thing to keep. And some flapjack, because my friend bakes the best flapjack ever and she started a shop selling it. So I buy it quite regularly. So yeah, not even close to £100. But I think generally the difference, I'd say Phil maybe does go and spend a bit more on me than I necessarily do on him, but I think maybe that's just him because I'm always telling him not to. So maybe it's just that mums tend to be a bit more tight, thrifty. I don't know. But we certainly don't even come close to those figures, neither of us.
Yeah, but what about you, Mark? Do those numbers resemble anything that is spent in the Richards household?
Honestly, Tim, I wouldn't think the last 5 Father's Days add up to £100. I would far rather that they... a year ago, my daughter wrote me a letter. She didn't give me a present. She wrote me a letter just saying, thanks for everything you've done over the last 20 years. I know we had our differences when I was, 15, 16. I'd rather have had that letter than anything. I'd far rather have effort in thought than throwing money at it.
Yeah, and John, I guess with your Molton Brown products, you pretty much achieved the average for all three of us combined.
Yeah, I should caveat that the wife's got a contact at Molton Brown, so I no doubt it was heavily discounted. And the other thing that I'm going to get killed for was Katie actually, out of her own money and not prompted, went and bought me a sunflower and a plant plot and painted the plant pot as herself. So that was the main gift from her in her eyes, to be honest. I'd like to think they don't spend too much money. I agree with Mark, a thoughtful gift that's of no monetary value at all, I'd much prefer. I do miss the little notes that I used to get from the kids. They're in the too cool stage for doing that.
I was quite surprised by how high those numbers were. Although I guess if that does then include things like meals, then it makes maybe a little bit more sense. I wasn't really that surprised either that the number for mums is higher than for dads. I mean, after all, although things are changing, it's still mums on the whole who are more likely to be home-based and managing the kids than dads are. So, I'm certainly okay with spending more on Mother's Day than on Father's Day, and like you guys as well. I'm not necessarily worried about how much is spent on me. It's getting something that's meaningful and thoughtful. I mean, in the US, the most popular Father's Day presents are dinner or brunch, followed by clothes, gift cards, power tools. What a cliche! personal care products. There you go, John. Yes, sports goods and car-related items. And in the UK, the ranking goes chocolate, alcohol, books, gadgets, and aftershave. So you can see where the British priorities lie. What do we think to that? Any surprises there, John?
If anyone ever bought me power tools that was related to me, I'd question whether they actually knew me. DIY for me certainly means don't involve yourself. We recently moved, well, I say recently in October, and I borrowed the in-laws hedge trimmers, and the last thing they said to me was don't cut the cord because it'll give you quite a shock. It took me 2 minutes. So yeah, it wasn't the best idea in the that I've ever had. So. But I've managed to. I can deal with that now. Gardening, I'm up to speed with, but still not DIY.
How about you, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, the kids have mostly bought me books, I guess, for Father's Day. As John says, if one of my children bought me a power tool, then I'd go and demand a paternity test pretty bloody quickly. Bottle of wine, yeah, fine, that's good. Yeah, so long as I get books and they've put some thought into them, and I'm fine with that. Absolutely fine, and the money doesn't matter at all to me. Really doesn't. If in fact, one of the best books, I think Dan bought me a book for £2 from a second-hand bookshop, but he'd been and he'd sourced it and he'd found it, and it was an old book on cricket, and he'd put the effort into it. He'd not just bought it from Amazon, so it's good. I really appreciated it.
Yeah, and I mean, Hannah, chocolates, alcohol, books, gadgets, aftershave. Does that tick all the boxes?
Phil has had many power tools for presents. It would probably pretty much be his top gift, to be honest. But now that his little man shed in the back garden is full to bursting point, it's pretty much flapjacks, alcohol maybe, Disaronno. He apparently did want a book, but he only told me that this evening. There was a book called Logo Modernism, because he's a graphic designer by training. But yeah, he kind of told me that a week or so too late. So yeah, books, alcohol, flapjacks, and power tools would probably be his list.
Yeah, for me it's very much books and gadgets. Although I do often get a little box of chocolates as a little token as well, and that's always welcome. As you guys have been alluding to a little bit as well, do we really care that much about the gifts? Now, at this point, I could pretty much copy and paste the usual rant that I descend into around Valentine's Day or Mother's Day or Halloween about how rampant commercialism seems to have turned these events into being so much more about material gifts. So I will restrain myself and I won't repeat myself again now. But have we lost sight of what these days are supposed to be about? I mean, it does feel to me like Father's Day in particular was relatively uncommercial until relatively recently, but it just feels now like everywhere is offering Father's Day gifts or running special offers to entice people to buy something, super special for their dad or husband. Does anyone else feel that way, or is it just me?
I don't know if it's being immersed in the blogging community as well, because certainly before I became a blogger, I'd never heard of such thing as Christmas Eve boxes, Valentine's Day boxes, and Easter boxes, and everything has a box that you have to make up for your children, even if it's a day like Valentine's Day that's not even for children. So I don't know if kind of social media has played a part in almost a bit of keeping up with the Joneses, which I really can't be bothered with, because I'd sooner we just spent some time together.
Yeah, I lost count of how many Father's Day blogs there were about Father's Day gift ideas, and
yeah,
I'm as guilty of doing some of those blogs in the past, but this year I decided I really couldn't be bothered, and yeah, I nearly wrote a post along the similar lines to you, Tim, and your thoughts, and just telling people with all the news that's going on, just spend some time with your loved ones and talk.
Can I just backtrack there, Hannah?
Mm-hmm.
I was in a state of shock when I first discovered the concept of a Christmas Eve box. Are you telling me that you're supposed to give your children a Valentine's Day box now?
Oh, Mark, really? It's Christmas Eve. There's Valentine's Day. There's Easter. There's what else have we got going through the year? Obviously, birthdays require all sorts of boxes. Halloween, I've seen them for Halloween. Bonfire night. Any kind of day requires a box.
Blimey. Blimey.
My kids are so deprived.
Your kids are so normal.
Yeah.
Clearly my kids are going to sue me when they're older because they've been deprived of all this.
I guess in the meantime, box manufacturers are laughing all the way to the bank.
I'm in the wrong business.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the Meet the Parents view on Father's Day. Now, personally, I'm not really all that fussed, and I'd have been happy with just a card and a lion. Although, if my family are listening to this, I wouldn't say no to an iMac Pro next year. Just saying. In the run-up to Father's Day, a number of dad bloggers were featured in the media, popping up in places as diverse as the latest edition of Blogosphere magazine and the Father's Day issue of The Sun. Now, the website of the London School of Economics was pretty much the last place I was expecting to find an article examining the rise of dad bloggers, but that's exactly where a guest post by Gillian Ranson, a sociology professor at the University of Calgary, titled Understanding Fatherhood in the Digital Age, was published last week. Now, in her article, Ranton notes that blogs are a rapidly growing sphere of parenting information and opinion, but one that until recently was populated almost exclusively by mothers. As dad blogs grow, they become a valuable source of data for researchers into fatherhood. So for a year, she followed 20 dad blogs in Canada, the US, UK and Australia, including our very own John Adams from Dadblog UK. So let's touch on a couple of points that she raises in her piece. So first of all, she talks about dad blogs as an enabler to building a community with other dads. She references the annual Dad 2.0 summit in the US, and of course in the UK, Al Ferguson runs his yearly Dad Network meetups, which the most recent of which took place just a couple of weeks ago. So, John and Mark, have you ever been to any of these dads only events?
No.
Yes, I have. So for me, I went to one of Al's. I think it may have been the first one he did. I'm not sure if that was last year or the year before.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago, wasn't it?
So I've been to those, and it was very different to usual blogger meetups, to be honest. And I suppose one thing, it wasn't just all bloggers there. But to be honest, I really enjoyed them. It was good to meet up, and the focus was very different and very male and dad orientated, which again is very different to a lot of the blogging events that you go to.
I go to a number of blogging events each year, but for whatever reason, the dads only events aren't really something that I've ever prioritised. Given the limited amount of free time I have, and that's nothing against Al or any of the other dad groups or events that are organised, and I do completely see the value of building a dad's community, and I guess I'm supportive from a distance, but I guess it's just not my thing. And maybe that's because I don't really see myself as a dad blogger as such, so much as a parent blogger who just happens to be a dad.
Yeah.
What about the role that digital dads can play in changing perceptions of fatherhood? I mean, Ranson highlights how in 2012 a group of US dad bloggers ran a campaign successfully to get the manufacturer of a well-known brand of nappies to change their campaigns that formerly framed fathers as incompetent. And more recently, we've seen a lot of attention drawn to the absence of things like baby changing tables in men's toilets. And a number of UK dad bloggers have written about the introduction of shared parental leave, which is something we've also talked about on the podcast a few months back. So, and what do we think? Is dad campaigning or indeed any other form of parent blogger type campaigning something that has only been made possible, or at the very least much easier, by blogs and social media? I mean, Hannah, any thoughts on that?
It's certainly made these sorts of campaigns more accessible. I think people are more likely to relate to something that's being written by someone they can perceive as being a peer, rather than journalists or traditional media that maybe they wouldn't feel as part of. So I think blogging and social media is just so directly accessible to all the other everyday sorts of people. So maybe that has helped in this sort of campaigning. I know Al did one about the baby changing facilities in this country as well, and so many people got on board with it. So I think it definitely does help, because it's normal people talking to normal people.
I also think dad bloggers play their part in enabling dads to open up about their feelings and the frustrations about being a dad, and a lot of blog posts have wrote about how tough it is sometimes being a dad. And I think in the past it was frowned upon if any dads kind of spoke out about that, and that's one area I think that we may have added to the communities that around us, really. And it's helped dads be a bit more mums. That's not what I'm trying to say, but dads being a bit more emotional and in touch, and they're not always hard faced. So
yeah, and it's an interesting point actually, John. I mean, we've all written about our families and to a certain extent some of our personal interests, but have you ever felt the need to write about some of these kind of wider fatherhood issues that maybe are based around some of the struggles that fathers have, or some of the emotions and feelings that we have that to our parents' generation maybe they repress those a lot more?
I have personally. So I've wrote about the how quick the kids are growing up and how I feel it's running away from me and I'm not having time to enjoy it. And other areas where I've struggled talking to the children about death and things like that have happened in the family, and how tough it's been for me as a dad having to sit down and explain to them what's happening and what's going on. Whereas traditionally, I think my dad's generation would have just told whoever to pull themselves together and get on with it.
How about you, Mark? I mean, you've gone into quite a lot of depth about the nature of the changing relationships with each of your kids, haven't you?
Yeah, very much so. And my own reflections of my father have been a running theme through all the years I've been writing. I think in respect of my dad was a very, very traditional dad, very old school, very much a product of his own upbringing. Will I write about deeper issues? Well, as you know, Alex goes to university, or hopefully goes to university in September, and therefore my dad blogging days come to an end because I won't have any children at home, which makes writing difficult. But I do plan for the last 15, 20 weekly pieces that I do that they will all be reflective, looking at changes, looking at how my role has changed, whether I think I've been a good dad or a bad dad, basically whether I've got it right or whether I've got it wrong, looking at specific issues, the regrets I have, the advice I'd give to any new dads, which can be summarised in one sentence, which is never, ever, ever stop talking to your children. So, yeah, I am planning to do quite a lot of reflective pieces.
And I guess I do write sometimes about kind of broader fatherhood issues, but I guess my thing is more I will occasionally write about things that are in the news or current affairs issues, but usually through the lens of being a parent and considering the impact it has on me as a dad or on my kids. It's not a big part of what I am as a blogger, but it's always interesting to look a little bit broader than just what's happening within the four walls of your own household. I mean, Hannah, any particular observations from a mum's perspective? In particular, has reading and meeting dad bloggers had an impact on your perceptions of the role of fatherhood?
I think from my perspective, I grew up with a dad who has always been emotionally available. I mean, he would panic a little during my teenage years if I suddenly burst into floods of tears, and his answer was basically to go and stick the kettle on to make us both a cuppa. But he was always very much a present and attached dad, and Phil's the same. But popular media would have you believe that dads are fairly useless, and so I think dad blogging has really helped to raise the profile of fathers, because they are no longer people that just went out the house, did their work, came home, didn't have any interaction with their children. Those days are so far gone now. And I personally have never felt comfortable about the kind of the man bashing and my husband's useless and I can't stand him, and all this sort of really negative feeling, or certainly just public sort of joking towards dads. I've never felt comfortable about that. So dad bloggers for me have helped to reinforce the fact that actually there are more good dads like my own and like Phil than there are useless ones, the same as there's useless mums as well out there. But I do feel like it sort of raised the profile of dads and helped to level out the playing field quite a lot.
Now, I guess the last point is that Ranton notes that blogging has helped professionalise the role of fatherhood, both in terms of positioning blogs as advertising and income vehicles, and also by positioning the bloggers behind them as parenting experts. Now, and John, you've been on Victoria Derbyshire's morning TV show, haven't you? So remind us what you talked about there.
That was talking about children and social media, and it was very much about how you deal with your children and access to technology. The main takeaway from that was Victoria was shocked that my daughter, the youngest one, had a mobile phone and an iPad, which didn't seem to shock anyone else in the crew or anything, which was quite interesting. And that was really talking about how we discussed the dangers of social media with children. So that was good, and I thought it was a really good experience, and it was quite nice to be asked to go on to that. It was amazing how serious they take you as a blogger, and value, certainly the researchers and the editorial team value your input in what you can bring to the table.
You know, you're, as a blogger and as a parent blogger in particular, you're speaking from a position of having had hands-on experience. Mark, how about you? I mean, you've made a number of appearances on radio as well, haven't you? So, I mean, what sort of parenting topics have you covered?
There's not much that I haven't covered, really, Tim. I've done quite a lot of local radio, BBC York particularly, and other local radio stations. Whenever an issue has come up and they've wanted a dad's view, I seem to have been the person that they've come to. So pretty much whatever has been the hot parenting topic, I've certainly done lots of internet safety and stuff like that, and obviously with the kids getting older, teenage problems, etc., etc. And I really like it. I would recommend it to any blogger who gets invited to go on the radio or on TV. Absolutely go ahead and do it, because it's really good. It's a good fun experience.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've just made the one radio appearance to date on BBC Berkshire, talking about being a dad blogger in a world that's mostly populated by mums. And yeah, although it was a little bit scary going in, it was a really enjoyable experience, and I'm really glad I did it. Hannah, what's it like from your side of the fence? Have you made any media appearances, and how do you feel about bloggers becoming more prominent in media?
Yeah, I was actually on Victoria Derbyshire's show last summer as well, speaking about exercise during pregnancy. And I think, a bit like I sort of said earlier, just sort of it being normal people speaking to normal people. So I think it's a really good thing that bloggers are becoming more prominent in the media, because we've not got an agenda, or we're just sort of speaking from experience, and I think that can be really relatable. I mean, on the lineup that I was in, you had me with Martha, who was 4 months old at the time, 3 months old, and I was saying how I'd run all the way through my first pregnancy and was at the peak of fitness very quickly afterwards, and then in Martha's pregnancy I could barely walk. He had another woman who'd given birth about 8 days previously, I think it was, who was lifting quite impressive looking weights up until her waters broke. You had Emily Leary from A Mummy Too, who had similar sort of experiences to me. And then we had Greg White, former Olympian, who has written a book about exercising during pregnancy. So it was a very broad range of people and experiences, and I think it's great that bloggers can be just these normal people getting out there in the media and telling normal stories that can be really relatable.
I guess the upshot of Ranton's research is that dad bloggers, and bloggers in general, I guess, have become a force for change and a source of hands-on expertise in communicating the role and evolving nature of both fatherhood and motherhood in a modern society. And I guess I've never really thought of myself as being in the kind of position where I can influence at least a small part of my social environment. But I suppose that's true. I probably ought to write a parody song about that or something. We've been mostly talking about dads in this episode, so let's finish by turning the spotlight onto the one mum on this week's team. Hannah, your world has changed dramatically in the last couple of weeks as you've recently started a new job. Now, it's not like you were doing nothing since Toby and Martha were born, so talk us through what you were doing work-wise before the kids came along and what you've been doing in the time since you became a mum.
Before I fell pregnant, before I had Toby, I had spent about 10 years working in various roles in special needs education, and I loved it. I never saw it as a career, but it was something I was very passionate about and equally very frustrated about, because it just sometimes felt like I was smacking my head against a brick wall trying to affect any kind of meaningful change. When I fell pregnant with Toby, I wasn't particularly happy in the job I was in, and I knew that I wasn't going to be going back. But I kind of assumed I was just going to be this kind of earth mother. I'd always wanted to have children, so I thought, I'm going to be tired and it's going to be difficult and all the rest of it, but I'm going to love it and it's going to be amazing, and this is what I was meant to be. So I just thought it didn't matter that I didn't have a career, because I was going to be this earth mother. And then Toby was born, and he flipped that notion entirely on its head. So since he was about 9 months old when I handed my notice in at my previous job, I've just been doing my blog, doing some freelance copywriting, social media management, and then opening my shop Apples and Pips last October. So yes, I haven't exactly been giving myself a break for the last 3 years.
What made you decide to go back to work?
It was quite a lot of things. I think there was a certain element of isolation with working from home. I did go to toddler groups and see friends and things like that, but it still all revolved around chasing the kids, cleaning up nappies, food being strewn all over the place. And it's not that I don't love being a mum, but it isn't what I thought it was going to be. I blogged about it as well. I'm just not cut out for being a stay-at-home mum. And I figured that out a long time ago, but I thought if I worked from home, then maybe I could get the best of both worlds. But a couple of years in, I just felt like I was ready. And with Martha turning 1, Phil and I made the decision a couple of months ago that I was going to look for a job that I could be really passionate about and have a career in. And Phil actually found this job for me, emailed me the details and said, you have to apply for this. And I was like, yes, I do. And they thought that I'd be as good a fit as I did. So it just all fell into place at the right time, really.
Tell us a bit more about this new job.
I'm basically a content manager for a company who does young driver insurance and cars for young drivers. So at the moment, it's quite a small marketing team. There's myself as content manager, there's a brand manager and a social manager, digital manager, and a couple of other people on the team who run the social media accounts and things like that. But essentially, I'm writing all the content for the website, for any promotional material they put out, newsletters and pamphlets to brokers and all this sort of thing. And I've got a one staff member sort of under my wing, so to speak, who runs the social media accounts and the blog. So it's lovely. It's sort of feels like the next natural progression from my blog and the freelance work I've been doing.
How are you coping with it all? Has it been easier or tougher than you thought it would be?
It's exhausting, but I had expected that. I've not worked 40 hours a week for a number of years now, if you ignore parenting. But I have to say, I think we've all adapted better than I thought we were going to. Martha is not used to being away from me for very long, but she's slotted in at nursery. She's doing brilliantly. Toby, we have seen a few issues in his behaviour. I think he's struggling with the fact that Martha's now walking and therefore getting in his face constantly. He's now at nursery a lot more than he ever has been. It's been really bloody hot, and we're pasty gingers, we don't deal well with the heat. And mummy's at work, and all of a sudden I'm not around so much. And he gave up his dummy, so it's all that has happened in the last couple of weeks. But we're muddling along, and we're all just pulling together really, really well. I'm actually really proud of how everyone's coping with it.
It's early days, I know, but has there been any impact on your blog and blog related activities?
When I made the decision to start looking for a job, I had decided to not ease back from the blog because I absolutely love it, but just give myself a bit of space from it. So I haven't been taking on much in the way of reviews or collaborative work at all, which I've never done loads of, but it pretty much ground to a halt because I just decided I wanted to write when I wanted to about whatever I wanted to. So yeah, I haven't done much. I'm probably only blogging once, maybe twice a week, but I'm happy with that. And it's when I do write, it's because I really want to, not out of any sort of contractual obligation. I have had to turn down some event invites because as much as I really, really tried to make it work, being able to get to my job and then do a day with our blog ambassadors at Rockingham, doing a supercar track day, and then get the branded car back to the office, and then get the train to London, and then go to a cocktail evening, and then be home again for work the next day just wasn't really working too well. So I have had to turn down some invites, but overall I'm really happy with how the blog is and just keeping it plodding along.
Yeah, relatively recently as well, you set up your own online shop, Apples and Pips. So are you still intending to continue with that?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I was in the post office on my lunch break today posting out orders. So that will run alongside it. Long term, I would love to be in a position to, hire maybe another mum that, like me, doesn't want to go back to her previous job after maternity leave. I'd love to be able to take someone on to help out with things like the social media and the blog posts on the Apples and Pips website. My mum has always said she's there to help if I need her to do the odd post office run or anything like that. So it's something I'm really planning on keeping going and hopefully being able to plough a bit more money into developing it as well.
Glad to hear that things are going pretty well so far, and hopefully they will continue to do so going forward.
Yes, fingers crossed.
And that's it for this episode of the Meet the Parents podcast. We'll be back next week, but in the meantime, here's where you can find the four of us online. Hannah? I'm
at Budding Smiles on all social media platforms, and the blog is buddingsmiles.co.uk.
And John?
Dad You Geek on all social media and dadyougeek.co.uk. And
Mark?
At Best Dad I Can Be on Twitter. Website bestdadIcanBe.com, or the book is at markrichards.co.uk.
And I'm at Thatcham Dad, and my blog is slouchingtowardsthatcham.com. You can download this podcast on iTunes and Android devices, on our website at meettheparentspodcast.com, and via a variety of podcasting apps. You can also follow us on Twitter at ParentsPodcast and Facebook at facebook.com/meettheparentspodcast. So thanks for listening, and do please join us again next week. Good night.